And I've received an apology from Rick Cheadle, who's, I believe, is in America, not sure. Councillor Cunningham, who's ill, and I wish him a swift recovery. And I believe Councillor Watts is going to be joining on Teams shortly. So at the minute, well, welcome to everybody who is here. Declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations of interest as set out in the agenda? Right. 3 items requiring urgent attention. I've not had any. And could a confirmation of minutes. Are people content with the minutes from last time? That's great. Thank you. We come on to Grant Thornton's external audit report. How do we want to deal with this? I guess. Would you like just to say a few words?
Yep. If I introduce it, thanks very much, Chair. So it's a fairly short report on today's agenda from us, giving some updates since the last time I was here presenting a report. What I'm going to do is focus on 2 pages in particular of our report, and they're stamped page 10 and page 11 of the agenda pack. It's pages 12 and 13 of the PDF copy. So, as your external auditors, we have 2 statutory responsibilities, one in respect of the financial statements audit and one in respect of value for money arrangements. If I take them in turn, so back in March, I informed the committee that we wouldn't be in a position to issue an audit opinion by the end of September, so just over a week ago, for various reasons, mainly due to a lack of availability of qualified resource for us to undertake those audits in that time period. We have received the draft statement of accounts for 22-23, so that's the year ended 31st of March 23, and they were published on the Council's website at the end of June. Since I was last here, we've begun some high-level work on those draft financial statements. We've shared some queries with management and the finance team for response, and we've also received working papers in respect of all of the requests that we've put up onto our document sharing software. I've discussed with finance colleagues, and we are proposing to begin the external audit in earnest next month, so from the beginning of November, which would likely move through into 2024 and January 2024. We've previously discussed some of those conflicting priorities that the finance team are going to have at that point, not least budget setting responsibilities. And so as part of that, we've discussed our project plan of what areas should we focus on first, to allow colleagues who are really involved in budget setting to be free of the audit as soon as possible. As I said, we've discussed those with Mrs. Buckle and Mrs. Henstock. In terms of committee cycles, and the work plan is another agenda item later on today, so we have a committee in December where we would propose that our detailed audit plan comes to the committee for consideration. And then the committee after that meeting is in March, so I'd envisage that audit findings would come to that committee, given that timetable of work, given that we would still be undertaking the audit during the December committee date. That's where we are with financial statements. Value for money work is largely completed. I need to share a draft of that report with Mrs. Buckle and Mrs. Henstock. I propose to do that at the end of this week. I've got an internal call on Thursday just to clarify a couple of points within the report, and then I'll share that with colleagues for comment, and that would then come to the next committee, so the December committee for consideration. That gives commentary on both the 21-22 and 22-23 financial years and the arrangements in place to secure value for money. The other thing I just wanted to touch on, so over the page now, is some of the national proposals that are being considered to help address local authority audit delays. So we've had quite a bit of conversation at these committees around local audit delays and where the general sector is with audit. DLUC has been leading on various proposals, and I set out 2 here, and I'll just very briefly touch on them. So the first is what I've referred to here as the backstop, and what's being called a backstop arrangement, whereby there will be set dates in the calendar in future periods, whereby if an audit is not complete, an auditor will stop their work and move on to the next financial year. And if the audit is not complete, that would lead to a qualified set of accounts. Just to be very clear, these are proposals, they are not in force, and given it is only the 22-23 financial year that we need to audit, and as I've just described, we begin that next month, I am not envisaging us using these backstop arrangements for West Devon Council. So I'm not expecting to issue a qualified audit opinion because we've not hit a timetable. But I think it's important for you to be aware of some of the discussion that's happening. The other proposed change is then a change to the National Audit Office Code of Audit Practice, which dictates the work we're required to do. We spend a huge amount of time auditing land and building valuation, so looking at the valuation of this building, for example, and also pension valuations. And as you'll see on the page previously, colleagues in finance team also spend a huge amount of time on pension valuations and property valuations when preparing the accounts. There is a suggestion that that work is too much. I think on a personal level, mindful that this is a public meeting, I would wholeheartedly agree with that, and I'm sure other colleagues would as well. So there is a proposal that the level of work that auditors are asked to do on those balances be greatly reduced in the future. Again, just proposals at the moment. So as it stands, neither of these things are in force, and we need to audit to the rules and regulations that are in place and have been in place for a number of years. But I thought it may be helpful just to touch on potential developments moving forwards. I don't expect that the work we're required to do on properties, land and pensions is going to reduce for the 22-23 financial year, which is the one that we are auditing. But the following financial year, so 23-24, that could well see those changes come into play at that point. That will be, of course, audited by the new external audit firm and team, so they'll be able to explain any changes as and when they do come through. But in my personal opinion, that could greatly reduce the time it takes to complete an external audit compared to where we currently are. That's all I was going to say today, Chair, but I'm happy to take comments or questions on anything I've said or anything in the report.
Thank you, that was very helpful. Do members have any questions? Councillor Sellers?
Thank you very much. I believe the pensions have just had one of their triennial assessments, is that correct? So that gives us a little bit of breathing space anyway, following from what you've just said about easing off from there. Clearly, as a council, we don't want to have any qualified accounts. So I'm entrusting our officers that you'll be keeping a beady eye on that, so that if there are any potential ouches, you'd get in touch with, well, who's going to be the new auditors?
Bishop Fleming.
Bishop
Yeah,
Fleming,
so it's
yeah.
Bishop Fleming.
Sorry, I
Councillor
forgot.
Sellers, but absolutely, and we do have regular meetings with Grant Thornton regarding progress. So if there was any concern, we would absolutely raise it.
So on behalf of the residents, we can say that it's as tidy as possible. Safe.
Absolutely, we're
Thank you
doing
very
all we
much.
can to ensure it's a timely audit, yes.
That's lovely, thanks.
Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, this was discussed at great length back in March, and the potential impact on us as an authority. And Jackson, was, very upfront and answered all our questions and concerns. But I guess, going forward, things can happen, things can change, as Councillor Sellers indicated. I get a couple of questions, I guess, just so I'm aware of where we are. Is there, two questions actually, is there an impact on our workload for budget setting at the moment, time-wise, because of the delay of this audit? And secondly, is there a potential impact on the internal and external audit of next year because of the delay?
Thank you, Councillor Ball. I think through moving the audit timing from January to start in November, that will really help in terms of budget setting, because that really starts in earnest around Christmas and January time. There's no doubt it's going to be a challenge because we're used to having our audit completed by now. So there is a number of other tasks that need to be completed in the finance team, but we will work very closely with Grant Thornton to ensure there isn't an impact going forward, and I will keep a very close eye on that. And in terms of your second question, Bishop Fleming are hoping to come in and commence their interim audit for 23-24 in February. So it's in all our interest, really, to get the audit complete by the end of January for 22-23, if we possibly can. But yeah, it will be a challenge, but we're going to rise to it, hopefully.
Thank you. Can I have a supplementary, please, Chairman?
Carry on.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. I suspected that's what you would say, and I'm encouraged by it. I guess the point I want to follow up with is that, as I mentioned in my preamble, that things can change, and I think it's important that we're kept informed. And I know you're very good at keeping the committee informed of what's going on. I do have a concern about all these things coming together around the same time, to be honest. And I think that we, as a committee, we need to be aware of any potential early issues. And I say, I know that you guys are very good at that, and I guess it's more for public watching to make that comment, really, because I think it's important. Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Very important point to make. Councillor Edmonds.
Thank you, Chair. A question around the proposal to reduce the amount of audit work on, on valuations. Is it envisaged, would that be a permanent change to the audit work, or is that during the period of, shall we say, catch-up? And if it is a permanent arrangement, are there perhaps certain conditions, i.e. market conditions, that would, mean that you carry out additional work if there is perhaps a stock market adjustment, property, or whatever? Would you revert then to a more in-depth audit?
So through you, Chair. At the moment, my understanding is it's a temporary change to the code. However, how long temporary is, I don't know. I suppose part of the risk of that is, as external auditors over the last few years, unfortunately, we've effectively become valuers and actuaries as well, because we're expected to understand in great detail what those professions are doing to allow us to audit those numbers. So there is, of course, a risk that if you say you don't need to do that for a number of years and then suddenly revert back to what was expected previously, there's a danger of those skills having left the team. It's a very good question, and one thing I omitted to say. So there are buildings such as this building that we're sat in today that are operational and used by the council to deliver services. There are also investment properties that the council holds, and actually on the agenda later on today, there's a report on investment properties. The relaxation would be on operational buildings. We would still be expected to do work on investment property and investment property portfolios because of the potential risk around those types of assets. And actually, for a stakeholder, you're probably more interested in, if a council embarks on that sort of venture, what is the valuation of those properties annually versus what's the value of this building, for example, because frankly it doesn't really make any difference to the services you're going to provide to the local taxpayer, whereas an investment property valuation falling or increasing significantly could change that. So the temporary relief, so to speak, is proposed for operational buildings such as this and not the investment properties. The only other thing I'd say is each year our work is risk-based. So if there was a very specific risk, unless it was very clearly written that you do not need to look at this, we may decide a stock market crash, for example, may highlight a risk that we would want to look at, particular investment valuations and such within the pension fund, something along those lines. And a final comment, I think Councillor Sellis mentioned earlier the triennial valuation, so absolutely correct, that was done and came in, that was done as at 31st of March 22. The accounting world requires a valuation of the pension liability to be done annually. The triennial valuation sets contribution rates. So the triennial one actually impacts your financial position, potentially, because you may increase or decrease the contributions as an employer you're required to make. The accounting valuation is an estimate at each year end of if every pensioner within the pension fund were to retire, what is the likely liability that the council would owe at that point in time. So that doesn't impact your usable reserves or the money that you're going to be paying out, like the triennial valuation. But under the proposals, finance team would still need to get an annual valuation done by an actuary under that accounting standard to put into the accounts.
Thank you. It's very clear. Thank you. Councillor Oxford.
Read this 3 times now, and I've just noticed something which has got me just wondering. Under the section on the backstop on page 11, it refers specifically to South Hams District Council, given that we are currently up to date. Is this version 1 of 2 reports and we've got the wrong one?
My apologies, yes it is. I didn't change that name. If you look at South Hams' audit committee agenda, you may see a very similar report went a couple of weeks ago, and that's the name that escaped me. So apologies.
Delete South Hams and put in West Devon. All right.
Well, thank you very much. Are there any more questions, comments? Do we know? Thank you for that report. Do we just note that report? Okay, thank you. Next, it's the update on the internal audit plan. Councillor Edmonds.
Thank you, Chair. This is the Devon Audit Partnership Update Report and Charter and Strategy for the year. The update report summarises the audits provided since the last audit committee and notes the progress to deliver the audit plan. The Energy Bill Support Scheme received a substantial assurance rating, which is an excellent performance by the team responsible for administering this scheme. 6 reasonable assurance opinions have also been provided so far this year, as detailed in the report. Good progress is currently being made to deliver the audit plan, with half of the plan completed or underway and the second half of the year to come. Turning now to the audit, charter and strategy, it is a requirement for internal audit to have this document. In essence, it sets out the responsibilities of management and internal audit to work together to provide a good framework of internal audit challenge to support clear and accurate assurance opinions. And Chair, if I could hand over to Mr. Middlemas, and he'll provide some additional comments on the report.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Edmonds. So yes, Paul Middlemas from Devon Audit Partnership. So there are 2 papers in the pack. Firstly, the update report and the charter and strategy. So if I can, I'll take each document in turn and ask for questions rather than doing more together. So starting on page 18 of the pack. So as you can see, we're looking at a reasonable assurance opinion for the year currently. That is underpinned by the number of reasonable assurances, I suppose, that we've given to date. In terms of a brief summary of each of the audits we've delivered since the last audit committee, I'll just make some comments on each of them, but there's further, the detail is in Appendix 1 on page 21. So just relating to the 2 grant reviews, so yes, so a substantial and reasonable assurance for those 2. Yeah, we continue to be content that controls are effective in ensuring the correct payment of grants to the right people. In terms of the assurance audit, so yes, we think there's opportunity for a more systematic approach to review the claims being made and how to and consider how to prevent them actually from materialising in terms of preventing accidents and so on in the first place. Also, considering the cost of the insurance versus the payouts is a good indicator of value that having insurance has for the council, but we don't have that information because they don't collect that detail. In terms of food safety, so obviously we highlight our concerns that the food safety checks have not been undertaken as part of the recovery plan following the pandemic, and we're aware there is a plan to recruit additional resource and inspectors to get to a better position. But members obviously need to be aware of that and perhaps monitor delivery, that's being delivered effectively. I might say we will include it in our audit plan next year as well. In terms of project management, so larger projects, we think that there's good sort of project methodology, basically, but we had, I suppose, less assurance on the smaller projects. So having a central register of the projects that are being undertaken by a project would be useful in ensuring that reasonable project management processes are followed. And then the travel and subsistence audit. So we did this in conjunction with a review by HR of the travel and subsistence policies and procedures and so on. And broadly, we agree that there's a need to improve line management, sort of visibility control, sign-off of claims being made to ensure their compliance with the policy. In addition, we also did a review of the Devon Building Control Partnership. So this was on the Timbridge plan, but as members will be aware, the partnership covers the 3 councils of Timbridge, South Hams and West Devon. Actually we were quite impressed by the team as a whole. Most of the issues I think were about perhaps the support being provided by Timbridge in terms of the IT provided by Strata, and also getting rid of legacy data on their IT system, and accepting card payments by phone, which is a risk. So going on in the report then, so page 19, we make reference to our counter-fraud resilience and assessment report, and we've helped to update core council documents like the counter-fraud strategy, and there'll be a section in the next committee meeting where Ken Johnson, our counter-fraud expert, will attend and give an update on that. Regarding the internal audit recommendation tracking, yes, so good to see that progress is being made, and there's a paper, agenda item coming next. And then delivery of a plan, so yes, good progress being made. More than half the work is completed or underway. I mean, ultimately our aim is for at least 90% of the plan to be completed by the year end. As 100% is just not practical. And so finally, so Appendix 2, I'll just highlight that details the audits and where we are with each of them. And then finally, I note that obviously we've got a DAP event on the 16th of November, and the flyer has been issued to members on that. So yeah, happy to take any questions on that paper.
Thank you, that's very, very helpful. Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the feedback, Paul. On the summary of the audit reports, obviously, you know, it's pretty good so far. I mean, reasonable assurance is fine. And looking through, there were only a few high priority recommendations, which is encouraging, and I can see that you know, the recommendations that went alongside that sort of seem to work with that. Obviously, we don't have the details of the other ones. As with any of these things, it's about direction, about movement, isn't it? And although obviously you haven't finished the audit process, it looks okay at the moment. Was there anything? There's a lot of preamble for my question, but was there anything in that you've looked at so far that would make you think we need to put this on the risk register? I noticed we haven't got the risk register on the on the agenda this time. So just asking that question for, is there anything that you think, not necessarily a big worry, but we ought to put that on the risk register to monitor?
A couple of thoughts occurred to me. Obviously, we've highlighted the food safety audit. I mean, that is a concern to us because obviously it's that the council has a requirement to check premises and so on. If it doesn't do that effectively, there's a risk of people getting food poisoning and so on. So I know we know there's been conversations with the Food Safety Agency about the plan and about recovering, and there is also a plan to recruit extra resource. But the council obviously is not conforming to that recovery plan at the moment. I don't have awareness of how consistent that is across the country about councils, not meeting their plan. But that is a concern. And then I suppose. Secondly, members will be aware that we're doing some follow-up work, for instance, on buildings maintenance and so on. So there is, again, an update later in this meeting. So we think sort of good progress is being made to understand what assets you hold and what your maintenance requirements are on them. So I suppose until that is in place, there remains a risk that you're not maintaining your assets effectively, and probably a lot more work is on reactive work rather than proactive work. So the risk of value for money and so on in that respect until you've got arrangements in place.
So the suggestion is that these couple of things that you just highlighted ought to be on the risk register. I think that's what we're saying.
Yeah, so I've got a bit of background in food hygiene myself, so it's one of those areas where if it goes wrong, it can be fatal for someone. And if we're only covering, I think was it 51%? I think was the figure in the text. Only 51% completed for West Devon Borough Council. The two recommendations at the bottom are kind of key. Ensure effective steps are taken. Who's undertaking that insurance? Who's doing that? And by when is that going to be done? All the time we don't have the staff in place, that risk of public hygiene, public health is prevalent, and it can be fatal.
So, Officer, I'd like to respond.
Chairman, yes. I have asked the Head of Environmental Health if he's able to attend, just to give the committee a bit of an update on where we are with food safety audits. And Mr. Luscombe's very kindly come up to the meeting, if that's okay.
Oh, please.
Sorry, Vice Chair, would you be able to repeat your question for the benefit of Mr. Luscombe?
The second question I had on this, because it's relevant to the same point, improving the accuracy of the Register of Food Businesses. Who, how, and when will that be completed? Is the other aspect.
Good morning.
Welcome.
I feel out of the frying pan into the fire. But so, food safety. We have a register of food businesses, which is on our corporate computer system. I think during COVID, over the 2 years that was happening, we saw a huge influx in numbers of businesses finishing and starting up. That coincided with the implementation of a new software system. So the work to make sure that registration, that's the registrations which are recorded on the software system are accurate, is still ongoing. So to give you a feel, I was talking to the lead food safety officer yesterday. We usually have something in the region of a turnover of about 100 businesses, food businesses every year. I think during that period there was probably a turnover of about 400 or 500. Actually, half that for the West Devon side, because that was combined, both authorities.
Two things. Could you put your microphone a little bit nearer, because you've got a lovely soft voice, and for people watching, I think it would be useful for you to introduce yourself. I can just about hear you, but I am struggling, and I have had my ears tested.
I will do, Councillor Salis.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm Ian Luscombe. I'm the Head of Environmental Health and Licensing. So that was the answer to the question.
What is that? Sorry, I was going to say, okay, Councillor Paul.
Is that okay? Sorry, I wasn't sure whether you wanted to say something first, Chairman.
Well, I was only going to say, ask Councillor Oxford if he was satisfied with the answers, that complete the answers, and then defer to.
Thank you. I suppose it links back to the question I asked Paul, really, and Councillor Oxborough inferred this. You know, our responsibility as audit is to kind of oversee process, and I think it's more about the process of how we go forward and improve where we are. We accept, you know, I mean, your comments relating back to the pandemic are perfectly understandable, and we get that, but I think, as Councillor Oxborough said, you know, what we don't want now is a situation to occur where, you know, people get ill or worse. So, you know, what's the process that's in place that overcome the concern that was raised by the internal audit about, you know, improving that those checks and when they're happening? So, do you understand what I'm asking you?
I do, Councillor.
Thank you.
So if I may reply through you, Chair. So I think what we need to do is, now that software system has, in the first stages of implementation, so it's in place, we need to just check through our records and just make sure that they're consistent with what's going on out there. So officers will need to take the list, and where we've got a query against a premises, is it still operating? Then we need to make a call to that premises to find out whether that's the case. We can use local knowledge to do that as well, through localities officers and the officers when they're out and about doing their other inspections. And no doubt what will happen, because food businesses haven't got a duty to tell us when they finish operating, we will try to make an appointment with them to inspect them or visit them, and they simply won't be open.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Chairman, make a suggestion. If it's not already, we ought to put this on the risk register and monitor it as a committee, I think.
Yes, I would agree with that. It's very sensible. I mean, I was going to... Thank you for suggesting.
One more.
No, that's great. No, you should. Everybody should steal my thunder. Councillor Oxford's got a further question.
Just the question, really, of if we're increasing the staff resource in order to catch up with what is in effect a backlog, do we have an indication as to when that backlog will be cleared? Because that time period is the period of risk. We need to quantify that.
So what happened during the... I'll try and answer your question directly, but a little bit of background. So what happened during the COVID pandemic is that the Food Standards Agency, who are the agency who oversee local authorities who do food inspections, they produced a recovery plan and acknowledged the fact that environmental health officers were engaged on different activities during the pandemic, and that, you know, that there have been a lot of changes in terms of food businesses over that time. So the recovery plan asked us to focus on high-risk premises. So a normal inspection programme prior to the pandemic would weight high-risk premises in terms of how often we would need to visit them, but also there is a requirement to carry out checks on low-risk premises as well. Now, the recovery plan gave us the opportunity to just focus on the high risk. So whilst the number of inspections that were completed would have been reduced, those inspections that were done were focused on the more high-risk activities. So in terms of catching up, whilst there is a gap, that catching up would relate to a lot of the low-risk premises. And indeed, when I answered Councillor Ball's question about, you know, what do we do next, some of those low-risk premises are probably the ones where might have gone out of business, might not be operating, so they will be picked up, you know, by officers just picking up the phone, checking on registration details, or indeed, you know, if we go out and notice that they're not operating anymore, that we will do. So I think, you know, the pandemic itself impacted on all businesses, but on smaller businesses particularly, and, you know, the likes of our high-risk businesses, such as the factories like Ambrosia, for example, will still be there, but some of the lower-risk ones will not. What I've asked the lead food safety officer to do is to provide me with a report in terms of the activity over the last year or so, and to make sure that we've got a plan in place going forward which is adequately resourced. I'm happy to share that with members when that's been complete, and that may well inform you a bit more about numbers and resources. And I haven't prepared it for today, but I could certainly bring that to a future meeting if required.
One more point, Councillor.
Just really to make the point that low risk is not no risk, and a lot of low risk mathematically means you've got a probability of one of those becoming a problem. So clearing that, even though they're low risk, they do need to be attended to as a matter of some form of urgency, just to reduce that risk.
Thank you, Councillor Salis.
Thank you. Ian, you mentioned closed businesses don't have to inform West Devon when they close. Should it be changed? Would it make our life, would it be more robust if businesses had to inform us? I guess we find out when the business rates stop and stuff like that, but should there be some process which is a little bit more streamlined?
Thank you, Councillor Salis. I think the legislation is the Registration of Food Premises Regulations. Under the Food Safety Act, they require businesses to tell us when they begin operation, but there's no requirement at present to tell us when they stop. If they change that legislation, then it would be helpful because it would enable us to keep better records.
Then I suggest that it may be a good idea for our committee to ask our MPs if they would look into this. Do you think that's a good idea? Because is there any risk when businesses just shut? Does the policy need to be changed? Would it make life safer and easier? Am I barking up the wrong tree? I might be.
I think it's members' choice as to what they ask their MPs to look into on their behalf. I think in terms of food safety risk, then a premises closing and not operating anymore, that results in less of a risk in terms of they're not serving food. So it wouldn't be one of my priorities, Councillor Salis.
Thanks. Yeah, I realise it's your job to advise us. However, it just makes me wonder, though, if somebody's just left a cafe or a restaurant full of food and potentially vermin and all this, that and the other. Anyway, maybe take this outside, but committee, I do just air that if it isn't in the policy that business, they have to inform when they open, obviously, but not when they close. It seems a bit untidy to me. And a supplementary, please. Have we enough personnel to be doing all the checking? Premises.
I think I mentioned the food safety report, which I've asked the lead officer to complete for me. I think those figures will be helpful in allowing me to make that assessment coming out of the pandemic and with the numbers of food businesses that we've got now. And again, I've always operated a risk-based approach, although as Councillor Roxburgh points out, there isn't any no risk, it's low risk, and it will be, I think, for this council to consider the resource that we put in and the approach that we take in a rounded sort of way with all those figures to hand, and perhaps we could come to a conclusion.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Edmonds.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment really on identification and registration of risks. I think I'm right in saying that each head of service maintains a risk register for their particular service area and responsibility. So I'm sure this risk would be on Mr. Luscombe's risk register. Those registers are reviewed by the Council's Performance Board on a regular basis, and the Performance Board then take the decision as to whether they will escalate a particular risk to the Council's central register of risk, and that document comes forward, I think, to the Hub Committee, and I think the next one is due to come forward in December. The strategic risk register that will come before Hub in December. So the performance board at some point may decide to escalate this particular risk or any others they feel appropriate onto that register for review by Hub their regular meetings.
Thank you, Councillor Edmonds. That is very, very useful thing. I mean, I'll come to Councillor Ball in just a second. I think the views of the committee, though, have been very clearly expressed in this, and I'm sure you'll take that into account. Councillor Ball. Sorry to steal your thunder. Thank you. Does any other questions from the committee? I do have one question about the insurance audit. And there's just a couple. I actually didn't understand what some of the points being made. First one, I question that Southam's 626,000 premium and ours is 100k. That could be good, that could be bad. I don't know that. The question, I would guess that a lot of the insurance cover is buried or subsumed within the contract. I mean, do we have any? So I was looking really for comments on the disparity and whether I'm right in my presumption.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, the difference is as you've alluded to, the fact that Southams deliver their waste service in-house, and that's a significant proportion of the insurance premium, and they have a much wider range of assets that we have to insure. So those are the significant differences through the premiums.
Thank you very much. Are we advised, I'm only going to ask this one question, presumably we have insurance brokers advising us, or do we do it in-house?
We do. We have procured the services of a broker, which we've used for 4 years now, and we'll be going out to procure a new broker in the summer next year.
Thank you very much. Anybody else have any comments or questions on this section? Thank you very much. Would you like to carry on?
Yeah, so the second half of the paper relates to our audit charter and strategy. Obviously, so our public sector internal audit standards require us to have a charter and a strategy. Actually, having a charter is very useful because, for instance, it directs that we will receive all papers and documents and so on that we need to do for our job. So we can say to officers, well, this is our charter. We have to see them. You can't say this is a draft. We need to see them to do our job and so on. So obviously submitting it to audit committee for you to review and agree, and obviously happy to take any questions on the charter and strategy.
Thank you very much. Do we have any comments or queries, questions? Councillor Ball?
I think it's very good, Chair. Looking through this, reading through it, it's very clear. There's good pointers about what's required and who'll be doing what. I think it's a very good document. Certainly support it.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? I actually believe it's really foundational, really important that we do constructively approve. I actually wholeheartedly agree with this. Just a couple of comments, stroke queries, things on page 37, where the auditors have the opportunity to meet privately with the audit committee. And I believe our private meeting is actually scheduled. I looked at section 5151 officer to confirm or remind me of my memory. My memory is correct.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think we were looking, we've got the work plan on the agenda. I think we were looking to see whether or not we could have the meeting to coincide with the December committee meeting, either before or after the meeting. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. The December, I think it's before the December meeting, I believe. Before or after the December meeting?
Yes, on the same day.
Because that'd be a private meeting with the internal and external auditors, as one does in good practice, which I think this, for me, really is is good practice all the way through. My only other question, I've got a couple more questions. Sorry to hog it, but I think there's a review conducted at the end of 2021 and with recommendations for improvements. I'm just wondering how that progress was being made on whatever suggestions they made, improvements for whatever.
Yeah, so Chair, so we had an external assessment. It's part of our standards that we have an external assessment every 5 years. And I think it was the people did it was a couple of heads of audit from a couple of other councils who came in and reviewed what we did. So overall, we are making good progress on the recommendations. But actually, I've been asked to suggest that you asked a question that the DAP partner committee is probably a better place to do that. Perhaps if you could feed it into the next committee meeting. That we are sort of anticipating to provide you with an update in February, but if you could perhaps feed that into that committee meeting. But overall, good progress. There are many recommendations in there, some less important than others, but yeah, we are tackling them.
Councillor Sellers.
Excuse me, I didn't quite understand that. Did you say something about adapt or something?
Yeah, so the partners have a partner committee, so that there are two actual meetings. There's the board, which and there's a committee, and the committee is sort of has the heads of audit chairs who attend to direct the partnership. So that's probably the forum at which you should talk about more detail about the partnership and how it's doing and so on.
Yes, I think Councillor Oxford went to the last meeting of that, or our first meeting of one committee. Final thing, honestly, final question. I was just looking at very interestingly on page 49 about your resources and so on. I was just wondering the profile of the resources, the skills that our audit gets.
Yeah, so you have two auditors who are paid for by the council. They've been working auditing in essence for 20 years, so they've got a lot of experience in auditing. I'm the audit manager, so I've been a chartered member of the Institute of Internal Auditors for more than 20 years and been auditing across the public sector. During that time, I'm also, as you know, the head of audit for South Hams and North Devon and Mid Devon and Torridge, and also doing work in Tinbridge. So I think it's my role to compare and contrast and talk to the two auditors about what is being done elsewhere and so on. Then elsewhere, there's Ken Johnson, who I mentioned, I think earlier, the counter fraud specialist and his team, who we can involve and is doing an annual fraud assessment against our partners. So cybersecurity, we've got an IT team, so we've got sort of IT specialists, and again, they are actually starting their cybersecurity audit in this council. In the next few weeks. Risk management, so again, we've got two or three people doing risk management, and the head of risk management has recently achieved the international certificate in risk management qualification. So, and then we've got specialists, a couple in data analysts and Power BI and so on. So, so those are some of the skills that we try to apply to council.
Well, thank you very much. I just wanted to give you the opportunity to demonstrate the breadth and depth of skill that's been applied to our internal audit. Councillor Sellers.
Do you have any difficulty attracting people to do this type of work, or are there an abundance of people in the country itching to do this type of work?
So I would think, yes, there is a shortage of qualified internal auditors. I think that's partly due to lack of commitment from the public and elsewhere to put people through training. We do have sort of quite a few apprentices that we're putting through training, internal audit and so on. But also trying to think outside the box a bit more in terms of getting people with the skills to manage projects and so on, which in essence each audit is like a project. So drawing upon a wider range of people to do our work, but it is, yes, it is a challenge.
Yeah, because the fire authority is another area where there's been a delay in actually having the audit, and I'm just wondering what the country is doing to try and mitigate that, and whether universities and colleges. I know that I'm going slightly off piste, but I'm just wondering whether you are actually, as an auditing company, actually doing stuff to try and attract more, because it does have an impact on local government.
So obviously, as a partnership, yes, we're as I said earlier, we're bringing apprentices and allocating some of our reserves to putting forward training for people for training, professional training. Obviously, the Institute of Internal Auditors is doing what it can to sort of develop the field. I think personally, this is all sort of also related to the Redmond Review, which, as you know, did result in lots of recommendations and the requirement, for instance, for independent audit committee members of every public sector body and so on, but that has not been put forward for the legislation and so on, although CITFA have now made it a requirement. So, but it is sort of in that regime of the external and internal audit. It's all sort of linked together.
Do we have an independent member?
I was going to... just if I just may bring this to the close for a second. The last meeting, perhaps our Section 151 officer would like to just briefly bring us up to date on the independent member question, and then we'll bring this to a close.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So, yes, this is something that is being progressed by the head of Devon Audit Partnership. At the last meeting, members agreed to have 2 independent members. We have now got a job description and a role profile, which I've shared with the Chairman and Vice Chairman. Yes, and we will shortly be going out to advert for that. So hopefully, very shortly, we will have 2 independent members. I think it was also included within the members' allowance scheme about the remuneration for the independent members, and it's suggested that that is at 0.5 of the basic allowance. So yes, that is being progressed as we speak. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Watch this space. Could we bring the recommendations? Do we agree the recommendations as set out up there? Mr. Kevin, sorry, Councillor Ball.
That's quite all right, Chairman. Just to be clear, are we including... no, we've moved on, haven't we, from the last one. I was just making sure that we had formalised the risk register bit, because we didn't actually formally propose that, but I just wanted to make sure that that has been noted and put somewhere. And I apologise if I'm going backwards, but I just want to be clear because I think it's important.
I agree. It's important. How do we take that forward? How do we take that forward about our discussion about the risk register and the progress?
Yeah. So, Chairman, and also there is a report on risk due to come to the December committee, so we can pick that up as part of the next report on risk as well. I think that's around the risk strategy, isn't it, for the December meeting? Yeah. So we can pick that up.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Happy with that, Chairman.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you. Are we happy with the recommendations? 1 and 2. I'm not going to read them. Noted and approved. Thank you. The internal audit recommendation tracker.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, the report summarises the current position with regard to recommendations made by internal audit as part of their planned audits. The impact of the pandemic and processing of COVID business grants on staff resources has delayed the completion of the recommendations, with some outstanding action points dating back to 2021. The outstanding recommendations are recorded on an internal audit tracker, with progress towards completion monitored by the Council's Performance Board. Members will have noted the tables in the report detailing the current status of recommendations raised during the period 2021 to June 2023, with a narrative for each high-risk recommendation still in progress or not yet started, and that includes a target completion date. So it's recommended that the Audit and Governance Committee note progress against the internal audit recommendations tracker and request a further update in 6 months' time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Any queries, points from the committee? Has anybody got any particular questions on the individual high-risk audits we set out here? I've got a question about the revised completion dates, where it's particularly in 271, where there really wasn't one. It just said really ongoing. I was just concerned that the use of the word ongoing is unclear, to put the least. Sorry, could 271, page 52, yeah, revised completion date, ongoing, as we should always keep H&S capacity under review. I was concerned about the concept of such openness, if you like, as a
Thank you, Chairman, for the question on that one. So this is around the capacity of the council to manage its health and safety compliance. And actually something we didn't want to do was specifically close it down in this report, because it's the sort of thing that we consistently need to keep under review, and therefore it is ongoing. But actually, to take the point, and in terms of a specific recommendation in an audit, probably shouldn't have featured in this report, because we could have said that is closed down, because as at today we consider we have got sufficient capacity to manage our health and safety compliance. So we have a group of staff from across the organisation to work with our health and safety leads to manage our compliance with that. So that one will drop off of future reports.
Thank you. I think you grasped my point more clearly than I stated it. And so, is the committee also content, particularly to wait for a 6-month update, or would like updates like this for every meeting?
Chairman, I think 6 months is perfectly acceptable.
That's great. Could we move the recommendation?
Noted, Chairman.
Noted. Thank you. Annual Treasury Management Report, Councillor Edmonds.
Yes, indeed. Yes. Well, this report provides details of the outturned position for Treasury activities and highlights compliance with the Council's policies previously approved by members. Members will be aware investment income was much higher than expected as interest rates increased throughout the year. I think there were probably 14 or 15 rate increases. In fact, £575,000 higher than the budget of £25,000 agreed when bank base rate was just 0.05%. It ended the financial year at 4.25%. The latest interest rate forecast, dated the 25th of September, provided by the Council's Treasury Management Advisor, Link Services, shows bank rate at 5.25 in March 24 and 4% in March 25. A summary of the Council's Treasury year-end position is set out on page 63 of your agenda papers. Treasury investments stood at £21.4 million, with total external borrowing of £27.7 million. Summary of investments held by the Council as at the end of March this year is set out in section 4 of the report. Treasury management strategy is risk-averse, with no investments allowed for a period of more than a year, and very high credit rating is required. together with a limit of £3 million per counterparty. This limits the number of institutions the Council can invest in, and a list can be seen in Appendix A. Appendix B of the report summarises the Council's capital expenditure and how this was financed throughout the year. The Council has a slightly over-borrowed position, which means that the capital financing requirement is lower than the external borrowing of the Council. This is a temporary position, and future housing capital projects will correct the position. In summary, the report confirms that the Council operated within the Treasury limits and prudential indicators set out in the Council's Treasury Policy Statement and Annual Treasury Strategy Statement. And finally, Chair, the recommendations are that the Audit and Governance Committee approve the actual 22-23 prudential and treasury indicators in this report, and secondly, notes the annual Treasury Management Report for 2022-23. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edmonds. Very clear. Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Edmonds, for the report. Just noting in Appendix A, page 74, we've got a RAG rating against a number of different organisations that investments are in. I don't pretend to understand investments. I'm a process guy and I like processes, but just out of curiosity, we've got a number that are indicated red there. Are they of a concern, or are they because they're small investment? Can I just understand what the RAG rating is on those in that column, please? The red, amber and green, if you're able to. Do you know, I thought you might.
Yeah. Thank you, through you, Chairman. So yes, the colour isn't an indication of the sort of credit rating of that counterparty. It is purely to indicate how long we could invest with them for. So all the ones which are in red are recommended that we don't invest for more than 6 months. So we can do a 3-month investment or a 1 month or up to 6 months. But yes, the fact that it's red doesn't mean any more than that. Whereas the ones which you can see there, which are blue, we could do a 1-year investment with them because that's saying a maximum of 12 months. So it's purely to indicate the amount of time that we could invest with those counterparties.
Thank you very much.
Councillor
Follow up to that, how do you know how long you can invest with someone for, or is wise to invest with someone for? What's the determining logic behind that?
Yeah, so we use Link Services, who are our treasury management advisors. They use lots of different criteria to evaluate how long a council should make an investment for. So they do things like there's something called CDS prices that they look at, and then they make a recommendation to us. So that's why we subscribe with them, because we wouldn't have the sort of market intelligence, if you like, to work out ourselves how long we should invest with a counterparty for. So that's the service that we're paying for, really, when we subscribe to our treasury management advisors through Link Services. So they make that judgment. It's a recommendation to us, but we always follow their colour coding, and we look at that on a daily basis, because obviously it will change.
Does that mean that there's something inherently risky in those that we are with for a short period? Because if you're with them for longer, then there might be something could go wrong. And if so, how is that articulated? How is that quantified, recorded?
I wouldn't say that the ones that we invest with for, say, 6 months are sort of riskier than the ones that we may do a long-term investment with. They would look at all sorts of different criteria in order to come up with what length of recommendation of investment should we do. We are going to be doing treasury management training for members before next March, because next March is when we will set our next treasury management strategy, and that will also look at how long do we make investments for, but also how much do we invest with each of those counterparties. So that's another thing that they would take into consideration. At the moment, our counterparty limit is £3 million. Now, we could look to increase that. But then that's, at the moment, our strategy is really we only invest with banks and building societies in the UK. So we don't invest with banks overseas. But again, you know, we always look at security, liquidity and yield. And we're saying actually the primary objective is if we invest £1 million to make sure we get £1 million back. And that security is always a primary consideration in that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sellis.
Sorry, I think you may have just answered that. It's given the volatility of investments, are we investing in some longer term, less risk areas which will sort of ameliorate our investments?
Yeah, we certainly are looking to do some longer term ones, and we have done, mainly because when we do our cash flow, we have certainty of about how much surplus in cash we have at any one time. And certainly when we were going through the pandemic, that was a very key consideration for us. We kept all of our investments short term, mainly because we didn't know, there was a lot of uncertainty around things like the amount of money we would get in through council tax and business rates, and therefore the advice from the Treasury Management Advisors was keep everything short term. We've come out the other side now of the pandemic, so we have much more certainty around our cash flow, and therefore we are able to invest in some of those 12-month deals, and some of the interest rates we've been able to get have been over 5%. So, you know, very good, very attractive rates, because obviously the longer you can invest, the higher rate of return you're going to get. So it is a balance between looking at our cash flow, looking at what cash resources we think we're going to need over the next financial year, and also being mindful that, you know, if we are locking cash away for the 1 year, we've got to make sure we've never had any cash flow issues. So, you know, there have been instances in other councils whereby, you know, they've tied up so much cash that they actually haven't got the cash to maintain their sort of day-to-day. We've never been in that position, and it is something, a member of Pauline's team, you know, they look at the cash position on a daily basis and make investments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, just to say that we are at the end stages of an audit on treasury management, and it's looking a very green report. In fact, it's worryingly green. So I think it's fair to say, yeah, we're very content. It is quite a sort of a low risk approach they've taken in conjunction with other councils. But yeah, we're content that there's good processes to make the payments and get the money back and control the bank account and so on, and also as Ms. Buckle said, ensuring that there's sufficient cash to pay your liabilities. Which, yeah.
Well, that was a very good trailer for the audit. And
so, Chair, if I could just add, yeah, recent investment that we did, that was with Lloyds Bank Corporate Markets, until January 24. That was a 6-month investment, and we got an interest rate of 5.95 on that 6-month investment, so very attractive rate. Similarly, another one that we did with NatWest Markets, again, that was for 6 months, that was at 5.12. So we have been able to look into some very attractive rates for our treasury management income.
Sounds great. Sounds great to me. Councillor Sellis.
Do you have a look at Aviva? I believe that Aviva has grown so huge now that you can only actually invest, that they will only do the work. You wouldn't necessarily do it through brokers. I don't know but apparently
Yeah,
that's
not-
quite secure.
Yeah,
I know we haven't got that.
No, we haven't. As I say, our sort of strategy at the moment is to keep to banks and building societies predominantly within the UK. However, we have asked Link Services to look at all of our treasury management portfolio, and we will be bringing a report back to members probably in December around how we could look, because it's one of our biggest income streams now, how we could look to change our strategy to see if we could get more treasury management income without taking much more risk. So, for example, one of those things could be increasing the counterparty limit. We've had the same counterparty limit for a number of years, and probably we could increase that counterparty limit, which would allow us to make more investments with the same counterparties without taking on too much more risk. But yes, that's a report we'll be bringing back to the committee in December.
Because that is reassuring, because the council tax and the taxes in general are just going crazy at the moment, and I don't think if we are able to do that, then and not increase council tax, that's got to be a good thing.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it would be prudent for us as a committee to put on record our thanks to Pauline's team. And clearly a lot of work goes on it to say, look at this, and it may as well be Spanish, but to me, in some respects. But, you know, I can imagine that a lot of time and effort goes in to find the right sort of pots of money to put in the right amounts over the right period. And I think I'd like to formally thank Pauline's team for doing that.
I agree. I think the committee should do that. I don't know how you're going to record that, but make sure it's in the minutes somewhere. Could I ask a question on about page 76? Council's gross debt and capital funding requirement says statutory guidance states that debt should remain below the capital financing requirements. That is 3.4 million above. I wonder what assurance you can give to the committee that we're not committing a heinous crime here, and what we're doing about it.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, so that's the guidance that over the long term, your debt levels should always be below your capital financing requirement. Our debt level is slightly above the capital financing requirement, and that is mainly because when we forecast forward our capital financing requirement and our capital programme, there were some, in particular, housing capital projects which we were looking to finance a couple of years ago, and at that point we were looking at the interest rates, and we did take out some borrowing at around about 1.71% for those projects, because they were within our capital programme. And what you are allowed to do is look forward over your capital financing requirement over the short term, over the sort of 3 to 5 years, and look to see what capital financing requirement you're going to need and to finance that. In terms of housing capital projects, you know, we do have a couple of projects within the borough at the moment, which we think that we will need to use that borrowing for. We also have other capital projects that, you know, that could be a consideration to members whether we use the borrowing for those projects as well. So we're not very much above the capital financing requirement. And yes, over the short term, we will definitely look to bring those two in line. But yes, it's not a significant concern at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've just got one question, one further question, clarify my mind, and I think it's, I'm looking at the page 77, is ratio of financing costs to net revenue stream. So we're at 10%. And I mean, what sort of level would we expect to be the normal run rate? So what sort of capacity have we got?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So in previous years, we have been around the 20% mark, and that is because what that's looking at is your cost of debt, so any interest costs you've got, but also any MRP, so capital repayments on borrowing, less any treasury management income that you've got coming in the other way, and a measure of that out of your net revenue stream. So the reason our figure has gone down is because obviously base rates have gone up and we're making a lot more treasury management income. So that has put our figure down from 17.3% to actually 10%. So that is good news. I mean, the government don't set a sort of benchmark, if you like, or a figure that you have to be below. Obviously, councils benchmark against other councils in that respect, but I think our figure would be quite low. There would obviously be some councils who are outliers, who have significant financing costs because they've got a significant level of borrowing, and obviously their financing costs out of proportion of net revenue stream would be significant. And you know, those are some of the councils that I think have probably been highlighted in sort of national press around their debt levels and their borrowing levels.
Thank you very much. Follow on from that was just, are we an outlier? Was my sort of question.
No.
And if we're not, does that
No,
mean
we're
anything?
not.
Thank
Definitely
you.
not.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sellers.
Thanks. Do we as a council look at ways of saving money? For example, there are areas, and it'd be interesting having the auditors here because it may be that other councils do. For example, I know it stopped during COVID, but it is now being reintroduced, the community payback, where people can do work which is similar to the needs of council work, you know, painting railings, sweeping, all this, really sprucing the place up. And you get a lot of bang for your buck. So I've used my locality budget to clear cycle paths, footways, that type of thing. And I'm just wondering if we are really adventurous enough as a council looking at how we can hire out for supervised maintenance repair and things like that. I'm not talking about boilers and all this, that and the other, but I just sort of the stuff, most residents want their bins collecting, we've got that sorted. They like their streets cleaned and everywhere nice and tidy. And I just wonder if we're actually missing a trick there. And through you, Chairman, I would like us to, our council to look at that, just to see whether we can actually work with the justice system, because they're trying to do that. There's also, we're already looking at house building, eco houses, which ex-offenders are doing, and it's as long as we find the land. And I just think, as an audit committee, we're in a good position to seek information from other areas, because it's absolutely clear that there's actually a lot of stuff out there, and I just wonder whether we as a council, Chairman, are really taking advantage of it. Is the committee with me on that?
I would just like to build on what you're just saying. Once I was going to ask people how to do it, but the risk register is often just looked on the things, the bad things that are going to happen to you. But a lot of places have a risk and opportunities register, which is really, to me, what where exactly where you're coming from. I think it's a very positive way to look at things. So I am personally unsure on how to do this, but Councillor Ball is coming in to save me.
I'm not sure about that. But I mean, I think Councillor Sellers has made some good points and important points. And I think as a committee, you know, we've always, you know, go back, and some of us have been on the committee quite a long time. You know, we've always tried to use the information that we've had before us, to find ways of streamlining, polishing, making things, better. And I think that's commendable. Of course, it doesn't always fall within our responsibility, and I think the difficulty with making suggestions from our committee is that we don't always have, I suppose, maybe the authority is the wrong word, but it doesn't fall under our remit. But we can make recommendations to other committees, to other, to the council leader or whatever it might be. So I don't know whether the suggestions that Councillor Sellers has made, that I support them. I'm not being negative about that, but I think whether we're the right people to actually form that forward, I think we can recommend that to the hub. But I'll take advice from other people. I mean, Councillor Edmonds will probably have a better knowledge of that than myself.
Councillor Edmonds is bursting to get in.
Well, yes, thank you, Councillor. But my suggestion was going to be through the advisory group system. That would seem a good place to start, and it's member-driven, working with officers. That would seem an ideal place to start that conversation and see where it develops and goes from there.
Yeah, the bottom line, the audit committee has to seek assurance for the residents that we're getting value for money, that we're efficient, effective and economical. And if there are areas out there where we know that we can attract help to deliver the statutory council services which our residents are paying absolutely loads of council tax for, I firmly believe it is our responsibility as an audit committee to look at that and make the recommendation to, as you say, but we need to be on the ball to recognise it's not just rubber stamping all these lovely facts and figures and everything like that. We have to get into the nitty-gritty. I've got no financial qualification other than being a housewife and an intensive care nurse in the past, doing applied maths. But I do know how difficult it is with the cost of living and everything like that. And if there are things out there which we can attract, then I think no matter which area it comes, audit oversees all the council, which is why it's such good fun to be on audit committee. Honest.
Yeah, so as I think the question is partly directed to auditors, so just a number of points. So I do see quite a lot of communications going out from different councils about the government grants they receive for community and sort of environmental grants that they then leverage and get people to apply for and do a lot of community outreach and so on. Also, I seem to recall that seeing something about this council about staff suggestions, about setting up staff suggestion, which I think goes towards your risk and opportunity register. I mean, we sort of always bang in our risk management audits, we always say, yeah, well, how do you manage opportunities? And I suppose broadly we'd like to see a more systematic approach to, okay, how are opportunities being identified and managed and escalated and so on. And I suppose that would include opportunities for members to put into that, all that, those suggestions. But as I said, it's not very consistent that councils do have a sort of suggestion box or whatever. And then just finally, currently doing an audit for another council on community engagement and communication and so on. And they do an annual public survey, and one of the questions is, well, there are several interesting questions, including, you know, how do you rate the council? How effective is it delivering good value for money? And is the council communicating effectively and so on, which I think are sort of good indicators of how the council is doing. So I just sort of highlight those points.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think I'd like to take this forward in the way suggested, that we minute the substance of the discussion that we've had, minute the positive comments that have been made by the audit committee, without repeating by all of us what we've just been saying, and the Councillor Edmonds' suggestion that should go forward, ideally as well, to one of the hub support groups. Is that what we suggest? That's what we suggested? And I think we support that. I hope the committee supports those suggestions. Sounds like we do. That's great. Do we have to add it to the recommendations or just put it in the minutes? Remember,
Yeah,
make that recommendation 3. That. There we are. Great stuff. Can you catch that in English rather than George speak? And that's great. And that's now really, I think it's really valuable. Really valuable. Could I take the proposed recommendations approved? Well, thank you very much. I thought it was a very positive discussion. Thank you. Could we move on to the next one, which is sundry debt?
Sundry debt. So this report summarises the sundry debt position as at the end of August this year. Housing benefit overpayments historically included in this report will be reported separately to this committee later in the year. This reflects the separation of the housing and revenues and benefits service into 2 bespoke areas and the appointment of a head of revenues and benefits in September 2022. 3 debts totalling 44,000 are included in the overall sundry debt figure of 142,000, which is a small increase in the figure of 135,000 reported in January 2023. The debt of £10,000 referred to in the report in respect of an overpaid COVID grant has now been referred to the Department for Business and Trade, who have confirmed that they will take responsibility for the recovery of the grant and will not seek reimbursement from the council. Okay. So, all debt is actively pursued in accordance with the Council's debt recovery procedures, and the analysis of debt by service area, detailed in paragraph 3.7 of the report, shows that aged debt more than 120 days amounts to £126,000. No write-offs have been recorded during the period of this report. Outstanding debts are regularly reviewed and a decision to write off made when they are deemed to be irrecoverable. And finally, the report recommendation is that the Audit and Governance Committee note the position in relation to sundry debt. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Chairman. It's been something that's always causes some discussion on the committee. I mean, I think, before I come to this specific question, I mean, I think, you know, the team have worked hard to reduce the debt overall, and certainly, you know, that's welcomed. And I think it's helpful having, you know, the 3 primary factors, you know, the 3 primary debts that, you know, we've struggled with on the agenda. Specific question through yourself, Chairman, probably to Councillor Edmonds. The 10k debt that the government have taken on, does that mean effectively that debt is written off from ours, and that adjusts that figure that you've just reported by 10k?
Yeah, that's correct. There will be no impact on the council's bottom line as a result of that. We will be in a neutral position.
So my specific question is that is now the debt 132,000?
I would say yes. Yes, 132. That reduces it.
Thank you. So just following on from that then, Chairman, referring back to what I was saying originally, that obviously reduces the debt below the last reported debt, which I think should be noted and should be identified as a positive thing. Obviously, the other 2, be interesting to know what's happening specifically with those, if we're able to talk about those.
Well, I agree with your comments, and especially during a very difficult time for businesses, that and residents. In respect of the remaining 3 debts, I think we probably need to go into part 2 to be able to provide more detailed information.
Chairman, I think it would be useful discussion. I'd like to propose we go to part 2.
Okay, I have some text here to read.
We need to make sure that the stream is paused.
The stream. I'd like to propose that in accordance with Section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 72, the public and press be excluded from the meeting during the consideration of this following item, in order to avoid a likely disclosure to them of exempt information as defined in Para 3, Part 1, Schedule 12A of the Act.
Thank you.
So could we...
Should I try and take the first?
Hold on.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, we just need to pause the live stream. We just need a member of IT to pause the live stream.
Yes, this is a point of the technology
Yeah.
delay, isn't it?
We're just waiting for them
Just
to
waiting
do that.
for a member of IT.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Would you, I'm just wondering if is there anything else that's non-part 2? Oh, here he is. Anyway. Here he is.
Thank you.
Yes. Are we back online now? Thank you. It's the, I think it's the our proposed work plan, is it not?
Do we note
Page
that
it.
recommendation first, Chairman?
Please
That's
do.
okay.
You absolutely right.
Just noted.
Noted. We're all noted the recommendations. Thank you for bringing that. Can we move on to the work plan? Is any particular comments on the work plan? Page 86, 85. We did note before the private meeting where things to be scheduled in. But if we're happy with that, we'll just move on. Item 11. Item 11, investment property update and monitoring report.
Well, this report enables members to consider the performance and risks of the investment property portfolio, which is made up of 4 properties purchased in the period 2018-19 at a total cost of £21.5 million. The gross rental income from the investment property portfolio is currently just under £1.2 million, which equates to a net revenue income of £300,000 per annum after deducting borrowing cost and an allowance of 10% for the management, maintenance and risk mitigation fund. The portfolio continues to perform well with an average net portfolio income of 1.4%, which is above the minimum target of 1% set out in the regeneration and investment strategy. Appendix 1 of the report provides details of rental income for each tenant, including an arrears position of £114,632. Members will note that this is an exempt document. It is worth noting that all the borrowing taken out with the Public Works Loan Board is on a fixed interest rate, so the council is protected from the current interest rate rises. The investment portfolio was revalued in March 2023, and the details are set out in Appendix 2, which again is an exempt item. No property acquisitions have been made since 2019, and following a change in PWLB guidance in 2020, any future purchases will be restricted to within the borough, although opportunities are likely to be limited by the recent increase in interest rates. Further acquisitions could benefit the management of risk by increasing the number of rental streams and spreading the concentration of lease events which occur in 2028. And the report recommendation is that the Audit Committee notes the performance and risk of the investment property portfolio to date. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Edmonds. Questions?
Yeah.
Councillor Oxford.
Looking at the Appendix 1, we've got tenant number 9, who represents more than 50%. Hold on, just
I think this is safe in part 1. Has any of our property portfolio got the reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete?
Rack,
have they been checked?
Is it called rack?
Yeah, rack.
Well, I think I'll defer, if I may, to.
Very sensible.
Have assets got to, have we got to that point?
We've had a look. We're not aware of any properties that have rack. We've done a desktop evaluation of all the properties across the portfolio, and there have been a handful of properties that we've identified for further investigation, i.e. non-intrusive investigation, so some further survey works. But we're not aware of any issues, and we're not aware of any rack as it stands, so we're appointing a firm of building surveyors just to undertake some visual surveys, if you like, non-intrusive of a few buildings, but it's a handful.
So then there is a potential risk there, as we don't know yet. So, Chairman, we need to keep a watch on this, and I suggest we have an update at the next meeting, or if not before, in the members' briefing, just to give some reassurance.
Yeah, that sounds very a good idea?
Because the horrible thing is, if we have, then that would be, we would be liable then? Would we be liable?
I think it would depend on which asset it was and the circumstance and, you know, risk assessments. But yes, we can certainly provide a briefing to members within the members' bulletin, Chairman.
I think that'd be good, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
May I just sort of link that to 3.9? Revenue earmark reserve for management and maintenance stands at 417,000, whatever. I just wondered, A, if we would have to dip into that, and B, how big do we expect that fund to be? That's two separate questions. In the normal run of things, we're putting aside so much money, are we not, for this fund? I mean, how big what figure how do we have a target figure for that? 417, is that adequate or not? And I guess the RAC may potentially blow that out of the water. Question. Is a question really for...
The presence of RAC doesn't necessarily mean it's about the condition. So if there's not a risk that we're aware of currently on our, there may be a risk, but we don't have something that we think is immediately an issue. Although we are going to check sites, as I say, with a building surveyor to look at places that we might think are a particular concern, and we can certainly report that back to you quite soon, I would hope. Although they're rather busy at the moment, I think, with all the others agencies that perhaps are looking at some of that. In terms of the cost of any remediation, I can't tell you without having seen that whether that figure would be sufficient. But certainly once we've done those assessments, we will be able to give a better indication.
Thank you very much. The second part of my question was not relating particularly to RAC, but just to the size of the Revenue Earmark Reserve Fund generally, and some assurance been seeking about its adequacy or otherwise.
I don't think we've got a target figure in mind. We bought our first properties in 18, so this sum has accumulated since that date, which I think is a good figure. That's been built up to get it to 417,000. The figure was set at 10%. That's the figure currently in the reinvestment or in the investment strategy. That's maybe a figure that can be reviewed by that committee at some point, but I don't think we're aiming at a particular optimum figure. It was just very much a case of putting some money aside to cover void periods, unforeseen expenditure, etc.
Councillor Ball.
And maintenance. So that's the level it's reached, but we haven't fixed a target figure of where,
Before I bring Councillor Ball in, I just think it's quite important that Council should have a sense of what that target figure is, because otherwise we're just not making numbers up, but we're just being, we can't answer the question, is it enough or is it too much? So it's beyond my pay level, I'm afraid, to do something like that, but I think property services, somebody should do that. Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I agree with you. I think certainly aware of a project that is going on, that a building's been refitted at the moment that sort of directly associated with, and the costs of that, have gone up incredibly just over 6 months, let alone over a longer period. And I think it's pertinent of us to, be aware of, rising costs in the whole sort of building sector. And I use that term broadly because obviously I know maintenance is slightly different, but it falls into that whole thing of having to buy stuff to fix stuff, and things are more expensive. So I'll take your point, Councillor Edmonds, that it's kind of being reviewed. I'm certainly not being critical, but I think the chairman's right to raise the question, and of us being aware of whether 417 is okay now, or do we need another sort of 3% increase or whatever that might be? I don't know, but I think it's something worth monitoring. Thank you.
So I just want to finish this off, because how are we going to take this forward? Is this going forward as a comment in the minutes? It's a relevant committee. I look to Councillor Edmonds really as resource.
Yes.
Absolutely. Can we take that forward?
Thank you, Chairman. I think, or it could be addressed through the budget setting process. That the 10% of all rental income that's put aside into that reserve was felt to be a prudent level of putting money aside with one eye on 2028, when we have some of our terms that are due to expire, with the eye that by the time we got to 2028, there would be a good amount in that reserve built up for if we had to take any action with regards to the end of those tenancies and looking to get new tenants in. Yes, certainly it's something we can review. It could either be through the Regeneration and Investment Committee or through the budget setting process, where we look at amounts put aside into reserves on an annual basis.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, Councillor Ball,
thank you.
And then Councillor Salas.
That's absolutely fine. I was going to suggest the budget setting because actually, when you think about it, we're kind of fast approaching that time anyway, and that'd be a good mechanism. And obviously, our colleagues in assets will be able to advise us, sort of with sort of better detail. And it might be that is a perfectly adequate amount, but I think it's worth us asking the question and bringing it up. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Salas, then Councillor Oxford.
Yeah, thanks. Anyone might be able to answer this of the auditors, please, or section 105. Or 10% goes towards maintenance yard R, as we've just listened to, and 90% of the council's investment has been received. I'm not going to mention any figures. That makes me feel twitchy. Whether this needs to be in part 2 or what, I don't know. I just need some expansion.
I think it's probably safe. Just play safe. Put it in.
Yeah. Okay. But that is something because.
Councillor Oxford.
Just a thought that we've got one figure of 10% that's covering a number of different liabilities underneath that. Is it worth teasing out those individuals and working out what is a sensible amount for each of those, and whether that relates then to a target figure or an ongoing percentage? Maintenance, for example, is something which will happen over time, but replacing a tenant is going to happen at a point in time, and so the nature of the risk is different in each of those cases.
Yes, certainly, Chair and Vice Chair. Yeah, that's certainly something we consider. As I say, some of our properties do have that end date of 2028, so that's what we were looking at in terms of setting that 10% initially, based on the age of the buildings as well, and what we know is happening in the market.
That's great. Can we perhaps add to the recommendations too about bringing this item forward into the budgeting process? Stated in English. Is that a, have we got any more issues in questions in part 1? Or can I move again? We move to part 2. Do I have to read the thing again? Can we move to part 2? tell us when we're back in part 1. I thank the committee. That's an extremely valuable discussion on this item. And I think we have an amendment or an addition to the recommendation is to take, I forgot what it was now exactly, to take the review of the amounts that we should have in the maintenance fund through the budgeting process, I believe that's what it is. And subject to that, are we content with approving 1 and 2? Well, thank you very much. I think that concludes the business, and I'd just like to thank the committee personally. I thought it was an extremely valuable meeting with some really good stuff coming out. Thank you very much.